So maybe the second question, most common question I get, is about role identity, especially for women. Mm-hmm. And so when I met you, you were way smarter than me.
Yep.
Not indicative of that one class that we had where I got an A and you got a B after the professor tried to fight me, but it's cool. And so then the next, that was incredible. That was one of my favorite moments of my life.
I know. 25 years ago.
Hey, listen, I can't let it go. That in high school football games, I can't let them go. Then you went and got a master's degree, and you're the only person at the time that I knew, probably to this day still, that got a master's degree because you want to be a better teacher. You were an elementary school teacher, and like, I want to do this better. And so we lived right down the street from this major research university. And then you went and got a PhD, and it was never in your mind, like, I want to go be a research professor and do all this stuff. It was like, I want to continue to be much better at this. And I never heard you say, like, I want to be a principal or anything. Like, I just want to, I want to learn so much so I can love these kids. Mm-hmm. And then I got a job in another city, and you applied to all these. It was a small Texas town, so you applied to all these places and all these school districts, and they wouldn't hire you because
not even an interview.
Yeah, because it was. Well, she ain't from around here, and it was this like, wait, what? Look at the credentials. Like, yeah, she's not one of us. But the two job offers you got were at two major universities in that city, and so you launched into this career where you became like an absolute gangster at research professor. And I would still be piddling around with my master's degree if you hadn't blazed that trail ahead of me, because I didn't even know what some of the words meant, and I didn't know where they posted the assignment board. I didn't know any of that stuff. Almost overnight, you become Dr. Delony, and like the most revered and feared education professor in that building. Like, your colleagues would tell you that same thing. You start writing like research articles, you're like presenting across the country. Like, all of a sudden, this thing that people work their whole career for, you waltzed right in and were pretty incredible. And you had an awesome team that supported you.
I would say I waltzed right in, but go ahead.
I'm saying, like, it wasn't the intention, right? Like, it wasn't like from day one. Like,
that wasn't the dream.
I'm going to go do this. It was like, all right, here's this incredible opportunity. And within 4 or 5 years, I mean, it was unbelievable, right? The university, like, senior leadership was pulling you into meetings and putting you on committees, and your colleagues respected you. Nationally, you were respected. And then you're married to a guy that went crazy. And a little bit. And so, like, this is one of my big, like, shame pillars that still haunts me a little bit. So you have this incredible, really, life, right? We got Hank, he's a little bitty kid, and the whole community loves him. The university community, all the students, all of our students love him. He's like all of your colleagues especially, but all of our colleagues love him. And he's just kind of waltzes around on a college campus just surrounded by love. And his school was like, I walked him to school and then would walk to campus. And so we just had this perfect little life, except that your husband went mad, right? Stone mad.
Which means the life wasn't perfect.
It wasn't perfect, right. And so we left. We took a $70,000 household income pay cut, and we moved to another city 3 hours away, where I got a new job at a university that still on its face was a fancy pants job, but it was worth a much smaller group of students. And it was going to give me some space to, like, get well, figure out what in the world's going on. And in that transition, you made the choice to not pursue, like, working at a university anymore, but like, hey, I'm going to stay at home, and I'm going to have kids, and we're going to have multiple kids, and I'm going to work part-time at a local school. And I remember watching with awe as you navigated the toggle of Dr. Delony, Dr. Delony, Dr. Delony to, hey, miss, like, right there, right? Dr. Delony from graduate students and, president of university to, hey, miss, by kindergartner who was super disrespectful, and like a classroom teacher who was like, oh my gosh, she's just an aide, right? And I watched as I'm in my own chaos trying to get well, and I'm watching you ping pong this thing back and forth. And then we, and I've talked a little bit about, like, we had several miscarriages in a row and navigating grief on top of, hey, miss, on top of what are we going to be? And it just felt like you wore a lot when it came to identity. And then we pack up and move, and we get our dream opportunity in Nashville and at a university. And then now, as Hank says, I'm a YouTuber and I do a whole other job, but it's afforded us a different kind of life. And so in this last season, you become a best-selling author, and you went and got your master gardener license, and you drive 17 hours a day getting kids all over the creation because we live out in the woods. How do you navigate? How have you navigated? If I look back over the last 10 years, that's a lot. It's a lot, not just professionally. It's a lot of identity shifting. Mm-hmm. How do you navigate that?
That was a lot.
It was.
Of question. I'll take it in stages, I guess. So the shift from university to public school, part-time, hourly worker, that was a lot of ego shift. Like you said, I had status, I had autonomy, and then I went to like sign your timesheet and not invited to any meetings of any significance, even though I may have been the most qualified person in the building. Maybe not, but
yes, you were.
It felt like it at times. And so that was hard. At the same time, it's what I wanted. The thing that didn't happen is I kind of took this leap from identity as a professor to identity as more leaning into the stay-at-home mom thing. But then our oldest started school, and there was no other baby to hold. And so there was a gap between the identity that I left and the identity I wanted to embody, and there was a gap. And so that was the hardest season because I had let go of one and hadn't grabbed onto the other.
There's no vine coming.
Yeah,
right.
There's nothing coming. Not that having only one child makes you less of a mom or less whatever, but he started school, and so those like the actual hours of the day. And it was hard too in terms of ego. I would go to dinners with you where before we kind of walked into a room, like a work event. We kind of walked in as a power couple, which, when I was 30, that
there was
mattered.
mutual respect. It was the Drs. Delony, right?
Yes, and we both had...
She's the stable one, he's the neurotic one, but they're both...
Yeah, we both had research agendas, and our vitas looked good and whatever. And so then to go, if I went with you to a work event, it was, oh, there's John's wife. And that was like, what? Or, inevitably the person sitting next to you at the chicken and rice dinner would say, what do you do? And it's
like, I used to be
it stung. Like, I used to be, but I'm not quite. It was just yeah. So that was a tough one. The transition when we moved here, I had already reestablished a healthier, I think, or maybe not healthier, but just a second half of life kind of identity that wasn't so wrapped up in what am I going to tell people at a dinner or how do people see me when we walk into a room. But just I have figured out who I am, who I want to be, and that identity transfers, wherever you want to go, however you're making your money. I felt more solid in
mechanistically
my identity.
How did you unhook that? Because that most people go to the grave in that gap. Mm-hmm. I talk often about 60-year-old guys still telling high school football stories because that's the last time they had an identity bigger than themselves, right? Or the folks who are veterans that I've worked with, it's like 25 years ago was your last deployment, and that's still the story of who you are, right? How'd you make that switch? Because that buries most people.
Yeah. Part of it's therapy, for sure. And then part of it, in that gap, my grandma her health was declining. She was in the last years of her life. Dementia was, kind of taking over. And so I felt as I was grieving my own pregnancy losses, I was also grieving the loss of my grandma, who was just such an important figure in my life. Mm-hmm. And so realizing like, oh, any kids I have at this point aren't going to know her, and she's not going to know them. And there was the grief in the loss of that. So in that time, actually right around the time when Josephine was born, I started writing my grandma's stories. because I wanted our kids, I wanted my cousin's kids, I wanted people to know her stories and her mom's stories. And these weren't tidy lives they lived. They were pioneers, and they lived hard lives, but they did it with so much joy and optimism and love and care. And so I started writing down those stories, and I realized, oh, this is giving me so much life back, because when you have small children and a husband who may have ADHD, everything you do in a day gets undone. Like, you change diapers, you cook meals, you do laundry, pick up the house, and the next day there's a dirty diaper and a pile of laundry and dirty dishes in the sink, and someone needs a snack. And so it just felt like, I know the stuff about like pouring into your kids and all that, but on a day-to-day basis, nothing sticks.
It's the worst.
It all has to be done again the next day. But I found that when I got up to write, if I wrote 500 words that morning, those 500 words were still there the next day, and I could build on them. And so building a writing practice was really getting my life back and claiming a piece of the day for myself. It reactivated that intellectual side, and I think for the first time really turned on a creative side that I hadn't, in academic writing, it's mostly
Just nerds.
Straightforward, and it's not as creative in the same kind of way. And so I found my creative voice, and I realized I can connect these generations that won't know each other and won't meet each other, but I can connect them. And then in a larger sense, connect my grandma's life and legacy to a broader audience too.
So here's a big secret that nobody knows. Actually, probably everybody knows, but especially the first 9 months I was doing this show, I've got all this expertise sitting with people. I don't say expertise from a clinical and academic standpoint, but years of practice just sitting with folks. And I would get such and such call, they would, Kelly or Jenna would send the calls. It was Kelly back then. She'd send the calls. Hey, this call's what's coming tomorrow. And I would ask you, hey, this person's said this, this, and this, and this. I'm thinking about saying whatever. And you would say, oh, good God, do not say that. God help you, don't say that. Why don't you ask them this and this? And I was like, oh, that's genius. And so, this is just us being as honest as we can. You're a way better writer than me. By a long shot. Mm-hmm. My mom called this weekend. She's editing your new book. She called this weekend and was like, hey, this is amazing. I quit editing it, and I just started reading it, and I just sat there and read the whole thing through. Just in an honest way, you could probably do this job better than me.
No.
Not that all the peripheral stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to hey, what should I say? Why don't you ask him this? I'm like, oh, that's genius, right? Or when it comes to writing, here's your husband getting paraded around on the bestseller lists and Sheila, look how many books we sold this month. And how do you handle that? Because I know it sucks. There's a good part because we share the same checking account. And,
yes, we do.
My boss flies us around the country sometimes, and that's awesome. But there's a reality to that.
Yeah, and that's when I'm still in the reckoning. Yeah, but again, it goes back to I have a core identity. So yes, it's hard to be an indie author, and I have to hire someone to edit and do cover design, and I do all of my own marketing, which is the only reason I agreed to be on your podcast. And so there's that, and then you have people who just a machine that just does all of this. And it's amazing to watch. And when I find myself saying, must be nice, that's not me being mad at you. That's me being jealous. And the flip side of that is I would never trade with you because I have absolute autonomy. I make all the final choices in my business. And you have to have your face on your cover of every book.
Right. I have to fight for everything.
I get to choose an artist to do the cover of my book. So a different kind of artist, I guess. So I would never trade that. ever. I set my own schedule and I see fewer clients in the summer so that I can have flexibility with our kids. Like I get to make all the choices. And I think for me, autonomy is maybe the highest value in what I'm looking for in
And autonomy is a privilege
work.
too, though, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You can.
It's a privilege. I mean, your path has led me to this place where I can have that privilege. And being an indie author is not going to pay all our bills.
Right.
So I couldn't do it at all if it weren't for your half of the partnership.
But it sounds like you're holding both. And that's like to me, I think both and solve so much of what's going on in our discourse in the country and in our homes and in our marriages and with our kids. It's like, I feel this way, and I'm going to go to the next right thing.
Yeah. It also, sometimes it does. I struggle with the fact that our daughter never met me.
When you were a gangster.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're a gangster now. It's just a different kind of gangster. Yeah.
Yeah. She did ask one day in the car, if you had a business, what would you call it? I said, well, actually, I do have a business. And I got to name it.
If you were a doctor, what kind would you be? Well, I am one, so.
Yeah. And so sometimes it surprises me, like, oh, yeah, you never knew. You never knew that part. You've probably shared this story, but she does think, well, she doesn't anymore. But there was a moment when she thought I was famous and you weren't.
Pretty awesome.
Because she saw me signing books for a friend and her eyes got wide and she said, are you famous? And our friend, of course, answered, yes. Did you not know your mom's famous? And that was news to her. News to me too, but she had never heard anyone say that you're famous, and she's never seen you sign books. So,
yeah, when I brought my book in, I was like, I wrote one, and she goes, Dad, that's not a real book. Like your face is on it. And
so
I was
there
like, no,
for
it
a
counts.
minute,
And she's like, it doesn't count, Dad.
And she's holding on to that.
That hurt
she
bad.
will not let you have that.
No, and she gets that from her mom.
Yes, it's her best quality.
Yeah.